In the village of Ogbifu, located in the area part of the Niger Delta, there lingered stories of a woman whose name no one dared to speak. She was known only by the children as the last witch. She lived in a very little hut. Her powers were said to have existed in the time when gods and men lived in together, and then, the land itself was filled with dark magic. The elders of the village spoke of her in low tones, a mix of fear and sorrow. But none dared approach her, except for one. Amora was a quiet young girl, who has been an orphan at a young age when her family fell victim to a dark magic that destroyed the village. She was taken care of by her grandmother. Her grandmother is a healer who lived in the middle of the village. She had always been different, speaking in riddles and parables, helping sick people with medicine made from herbs and strange roots. When Amora was old enough, she was taught the ways of using plants to cure sickness, how to read the patterns of the stars, and, most importantly, how to communicate with spirits. She loves the part of communicating with the spirit and hungered for dark magic. But her grandmother had two rules: never go far into the forest and never seek to know about what lies beyond forbidden boundaries. But young curious Amora would break one rule if the opportunity ever comes. And then, the opportunity yielded in. For a long period of time, the villagers had been talking about a deadly sickness that is taking lives of some villagers, about the strange signs in the sky. Nina, the village seer, had said that the spirits of the land were restless, that something was coming. But Amora thought that the true cause of everything is more than the mere complaints of the gods. Her instincts tells her something is not right, and it's not even about the gods. She feels she has to do something. She wants to become the savior of the land. Although her grandmother had warned her about the last witch, she finds something interesting about her and wished to satisfy her curiosity. On Tuesday night, Amora couldn't sleep. A soft voice called her from the deep part of the forest. It was a low sound, almost like a chant, and it called her with a strange pull that she couldn't ignore. Something within her knew that the time had come. She feels she was born to have dark magic. She had to find the source of the magic, the one that had cursed her people for generations. She rose up from the mat. While her grandmother was busy snoring, she sneaked out following the sound and walked into the forest. The deeper Amora walked, the darker the forest became. But she wasn't scared. The trees grew thick and twisted, their roots twisting out of the earth like fingers trying to reach for her. The air was thick with a very pleasant scent. Amora noticed something metallic, like blood on the trees. She could feel the magic now, coming around her, dark and ancient, as if it had been waiting for her. She was happy, and thought she had found her destiny. The voice called again, this time closer to her, wrapping around her like a shadow. Amora, come closer. Your destiny awaits. With every step she takes, the forest seemed to grow more dark. Strange noises echoed from the trees, footsteps of something unseen moving. But Amora pressed on, looking so brave, she had to reach the voice wherever it leads her to in the forest. After what felt like hours following the voice, she finally arrived inside a temple, where the voice is coming from. A very big temple in the middle of the forest. At the center of the temple was an altar, ancient and covered in dust, with a native pot in it. It was surrounded by statues of creatures that look like human skulls. Their eyes big and dark. Amora was astonished, and first time she was scared, she moved into the temple cautiously, but as her fingers touched the wall, a surge of energy shot through her body. She paused back, gasping for breath. The magic was alive in the walls, alive in the air, alive in her. She was so happy as her dreams comes true. But she has no idea of the consequences. She summoned courage and walked to the center of the temple where the native pot is. Open it, the voice whispered, this time coming from the temple itself. With a trembling hand, Amora stretched her hand towards the native pot and opened it. There was a low rumble, like the earth itself was waking up. Slowly, a white smoke started coming out of the pot. Amora shifted back in fear and terror. The smoke came out heavily as if it had been waiting for this moment. And then, the smoke formed in a human. It was a woman, an old-looking woman. Her long hairs was tangled and wild. Her body was covered with tattoos of ancient symbols of magic. But her eyes glowed with a light, a deep red light that seemed to burn into Amora's soul. The woman was dead, but not truly gone. She was caged in the native pot for over 1,000 years. Her spirit was trapped between the world of the living and dead. Amora stared in fear, feeling the weight of the witch's presence pressing down on her. "You found me," the voice whispered again, this time from the witch's mouth, her lips moving, even though she did not breathe. "Now, you will release me," said the witch. Amora stood still, her mind racing. Her grandmother had told her stories of the last witch, the one who had once ruled the land with blood and fire. She had been a powerful sorceress who had tried to overthrow the gods, to enslave mankind with her dark forces. But the gods, in their wrath, had struck her down, locking her in this very native pot to prevent her powers from spreading. But what if the witch's power could save her village? What if the curse could be broken? Amora thought. "You cannot undo what has been done," the witch's voice echoed in her mind. "But you can join me, become one with me. Together, we will rule the world once more." Amora was shaking badly. Her grandmother's warnings flashed in her mind, "The witch is poison, my child. She will consume you. She will make you her vessel. And then, there will be no turning back." But the people were suffering. She could feel their pain, their hunger, their sickness, their fear. She could feel the weight of their hopelessness on her shoulders. Was it so wrong to seek power to save them? Amora thought again. "Give me your soul, and I will give you the power to save them all," the witch promised. "You will be the one they worship, the one they fear. You will be the last witch." Amora stood still, looking so scared. Then, with a deep breath, she walked towards the witch. She placed her hands on the witch's cold chest as the witch has requested, feeling the pulse of magic in her fingertips. A voice inside her urged her to stop, to run back to the village and forget all of this. But it was too late. She had already made her choice. She wants to become a savior. The moment her hands made contact with the witch heart, the world exploded around her. Dark smoke took over the temple. Unusual thunderstrike was heard in the village. The sky darkened, clouds rumbling as if a storm was coming down the village. Amora's body felt like it was being torn apart and remade, her blood burning with the power she had unleashed. The witch's spirit poured into her, filling her, binding her, becoming her. She screamed, a very loud cry that echoed through the forest and beyond, shaking every trees. And then, suddenly, it stopped. Amora stood, her eyes glowing with the same red light as the witch's. The forest was still, the air thick with the weight of her new power. She could feel the magic inside her, a force greater than anything she had ever known. The villagers would worship her now. They would fear her. She was the last witch, the one who could save the village or destroy them. Her grandmother's face flashed in her mind, her voice warning her to run, to leave before it was too late. But Amora no longer felt like the same girl who had walked into this forest hours ago. She was different. Stronger. And as she turned toward the village, her heart no longer beat with doubt. She was ready. In less than 10 seconds, she returned to her grandmother's hut and lay beside her like nothing happened. In the morning she found out that her grandmother has gave up the ghost. She cried and was unable to eat for 1 week. After some weeks, Amora's power grew. She became talk of the town. The village that was once cursed by sickness and death, now thrived under her rule. Crops flourished, the sick were healed, and the people spoke of her with awe and fear. But with every act of magic, with every life she saved, there was a price. The land around the village grew darker, the trees twisted, and the animals grew wild and aggressive. And in the quiet moments, when Amora was alone, she could feel the witch's presence within her. The dark hunger, the desire for more power, for more control. The witch's influence grew stronger, and Amora knew that soon, it would be impossible to distinguish between her and the witch. After few months, the villagers began to notice some changes. Unknown voices grew louder in the village square, things started to turn from good to bad, and some villagers are fleeing before the darkness consumes them all. But Amora could not turn back. She had made her choice, and now, she would fulfill her destiny. The last witch was not a savior. She was the beginning of something much darker, a force that could not be controlled. And so, with the weight of the world on her shoulders, Amora stood at the edge of the forest, watching the smoke rise from her village. The last witch had awakened. Amora felt the witch's presence in every of her breath. It was like a dark shadow that keeps moving behind her, whispering to her soul. At first, it had been slow, the power, intoxicating and strange. But now, it consumed her thoughts entirely. It was no longer her mind, it was a duality. Amora and the witch had fused, but the witch's will was stronger than she had imagined. The villagers, meanwhile, were still living in the sudden prosperity. Fields that were once been barren were now filled up with crops. Streams that had run dry were now flowing with clean, sparkling, and fresh water. The sick were healed within days. It was as though the land itself had come alive, responding to the magic that came from Amora's very being. Her power was undeniable, and she had the villagers sing praise and adoration to her. Yet, with every new blessing she gives to them, the land around her grew darker. Her grandmother's warnings echoed in her mind. Power cannot come without a price, child. The earth must be balanced. But Amora, lost in the thrill of her newfound strength, pushed those thoughts aside. She was the last witch. There was no going back. Months passed, and the villagers began to notice more strange things every day. The once beautiful forest, which had always stood as a quiet protector, was now twisted. The birds, which had once sung from the branches, were silent. The sky above was always formed with a strange, unnatural color. It wasn't just the land that was changing. The villagers themselves had begun to change too. They became more sick, their eyes drained as if something essential had been taken from them. Many spoke of dreams, dark, vivid dreams where they saw Amora, her face not just a girl's face anymore, but the twisted, ancient face of the witch. They spoke of shadows following them, of voices in the night calling them to the forest. In the middle of all this, a young man named Ikenna, who had grown up alongside Amora, began to see things that disturbed him. Ikenna had known Amora since childhood, and though he had always felt a bond with her, there was something different in her eyes now, something cold. And it terrifies him. One night, after having a particular disturbing dream in which Amora had appeared, Ikenna decided to confront her. He knew something had gone very wrong. He had seen it in the way the villagers looked at her, with fear and confusion all in one. He found Amora at the edge of the forest, standing motionless, staring into the trees as if waiting for something to happen. Her eyes glowed with color of red, and her hair twisted like a dark river. "Amora," Ikenna called softly, his voice barely a whisper. "What have you done?" Amora turned slowly to face him, her gaze looking so sharp, her lips turning into a faint smile that sent a shiver down Ikenna's spine. "I've saved them, Ikenna," she said, her voice low and soft, but there was something in it, a low echo that wasn't her own. "I've given them everything they need. Power, prosperity, safety. But at what cost?" Ikenna asked, stepping forward, his heart pounding. "Look at the land. Look at the village. You've given them your power, but you're taking their souls, Amora. Can't you see what's happening? You're becoming her." For the first time, a deep thought of fear passed through Amora's eyes. But it vanished just as quickly, replaced by a smile. "You don't understand, Ikenna," she said, her voice soft but growing colder with each word. "You think I'm becoming her, but I am her. I always have been. The witch is not a curse. She is freedom. Power. I am the last witch, and I will reshape this world." Ikenna's chest tightened. "And what about the people, Amora? What about the ones you love? What about me?" Amora's eyes flashed red, her expression suddenly changed. She lifted her hand and a smoke of dark energy filled her fingertips. "You're afraid of what I've become. You're afraid of the darkness I now carry. But it's too late, Ikenna. The transformation is complete." Before he could react, Amora raised her hand. The dark energy shot forward, hitting Ikenna in the chest, knocking him backward to the ground. He struggled for air, unable to move as if invisible chains were holding him down. "You were my friend, Ikenna," Amora murmured. "But now, you are just another obstacle in my way." Ikenna's heart beats loudly as he fought the pressure in his chest. "Amora, please." Her expression became soft, but it was only for a moment, as if part of her still remembered the girl she once was. Then, just as quickly, the softness faded away and was replaced by something colder, something darker. She turned away, leaving Ikenna on the ground, struggling to breathe. Ikena could barely gather the strength to get up. The darkness that Amora had unleashed now surrounds the village like a blanket. The crops were dying despite the magic that once brought them to life. The river had gone black, polluted by an unnatural substance that seemed to have come from nowhere. The villagers were no longer the cheerful, hopeful people they once were. Now, they walked with drained eyes that are filled with mixture of fear and worship. The elders of the village began to meet in secret, their voices low as they discussed the growing problem in the village. They knew that the witch's power had grown beyond their control, that it was too late to reason with Amora. But they also know something else. They had a choice. They could either submit to Amora's rule, allow her to take the village and the land completely, or they could try to break the curse. But doing so would require a sacrifice. One that would be costly beyond measure. The witch had not just taken the village's soul, she had them in control. The land, and the people of Ogbifu were now part of her dark magic. To break the curse would mean destroying the witch's biggest power. But to do so, they would have to confront Amora directly, and there was no telling if any of them would survive the attempt. Ikena knew what he had to do. His heart was heavy with the weight of betrayal from Amora, but he could not let Amora continue down this path. He had seen the true cost of her magic, and though it hurt him to think of her as the monster she was becoming, he knew that the village's survival depends on her. He would have to confront her, no matter what it will cost him. Amora was standing once again at the edge of the forest when Ikena found her. She turned, sensing his presence before he even spoke. "Ikena," she said, her voice rich with power. "You still don't understand, do you? You think you can save me from myself? You think you can change what I've become?" He stepped forward, his voice shaking but confident. "Amora, I know you're still in there. I know you're not completely gone. Please, this isn't you. This power, it's consuming you." Amora's eyes blinked, and for a brief moment, the girl he once knew was there. But she is going slowly. She shook her head, and the witch's power came to life around her. A black smell took over the environment immediately. "You think I don't see what you're doing?" she asked. "You came to kill me, didn't you? To destroy what I've built. But you can't. I am the witch now, Ikena. And you will either serve me, or you will die." Ikena took a deep breath, still summons the courage to face the darkness in front of him. "Then I will die," he said. Yet his heart pounded in his chest as Amora raised her hands to the sky, her fingers sparkling with dark energy. The air around them formed darkness with the unbearable weight of her power, and the ground beneath their feet trembled as if the very earth could not contain the force that came from her. Her transformation was complete, the last which had emerged, and the world, it seemed, was already bending to her will. "You're too late, Ikena," Amora said, her voice now a cold, distant echo. "I've already made my choice. There's no going back. The witch's blood flows in my veins. The earth, the sky, the people, they are all mine." Ikena stood strong, though his body trembled. The Amora he once knew, the girl he had laughed with under the orange tree of their village, was slipping away, replaced by something far darker, something beyond his reach. "I'm not here to save you from yourself, Amora," he said, his voice steady, though his throat felt tight with emotion. "I'm here to stop you from destroying everything. The village, the people, me. You're losing yourself to the witch's power. You're letting her consume you." A light of pain flashed in Amora's eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it had come. She took a step forward, her gaze steady. "You still think you can stop me? That you can save them from me?" Her lips turned into a smile that was both seductive and terrifying. "No, Ikena. I am beyond saving. I am power. I am the witch. It's my destiny." Before Ikena could react, Amora shot a wave of dark energy from her hand directly to Ikena's chest and knocking him to the ground. He struggled for air. His thoughts blurred, and for a moment, he lost all sense of time and place. The pain was unbearable, but his will to fight was stronger. Amora's voice echoed in his mind. "You cannot defeat me, Ikena. Not now. Not ever." Back in the village, the elders had gathered, their faces sad as they discussed what to do next. They knew that the situation had reached a no-going-back point. Amora, now fully consumed by the witch's spirit, was a force of nature unstoppable. But they also know that there was one final hope, the ancient ritual that could stop the bond between the witch and the village. Nina, the village diviner, had spoken of it in the past, how the witch could be stopped, how the power of her dark magic could be destroyed. But it required a rare and dangerous set of circumstances, a price that no one had been willing to pay before now. The ritual could not be done by just any person. Only someone with the strength of spirit and the purity of heart could perform it. Someone willing to sacrifice everything. "Who among us will go?" one of the elders asked, his voice sounds with fear. There was a long, heavy silence before Nina spoke again. "It must be Ikenna." The room went still. All eyes turned to her. "Ikenna?" an elder asked astonishingly. "But he is no priest, no spiritual leader. He's just a boy," another elder spoke. Nina shook her head. "He has the strength within him. He always has. And he has something the rest of us don't, a bond with Amora. Only his love for her can break the witch's curse." "Ikenna may have been her friend once," another elder murmured, "but what remains of him now? He's likely already lost." Nina's eyes softened. "We have no other choice. If Ikenna doesn't act, we all fall." Ikenna's vision blurred, his body racked with pain, but his spirit remained strong. The power that came through the witch, through Amora, was suffocating, but he couldn't allow her to destroy everything. Her eyes were locked on him, burning with a red thick light. "It's over," she said, her voice calm now, almost tender. "You should have joined me, Ikenna. You should have understood." "I understand more than you think," he said, pushing himself up from the ground, the pain in his chest subsiding. "I understand that you're not the witch. You're Amora. You're still my friend." For a moment, Amora's eyes blinked again, just a flash of her old self. It was as if something deep inside her struggled to break free. But the witch's presence was too strong, stronger than her own spirit. The darkness inside her grew to the surface, and Amora's voice became cold once again. "You're a fool, Ikenna," she hissed. "I am the last witch. I cannot be stopped." With a wave of her hand, the earth cracked open around them, and dark smoke of energy came up from the ground, wrapping Ikenna, pulling him down into the darkness. His body screamed in protest as the magic tied around him like chains. But even in the suffocating grip of her power, he didn't give up. The villagers were depending on him. Amora's power was only a reflection of her inner pain and fear, he could see it now. She wasn't just a creature of darkness, she was a girl who had lost herself, who had been consumed by the need for control. He reached deep inside, past the fear, past the suffocating power, and found the love he still carried for her. "I won't let you go, Amora," Ikenna said loudly, his voice slow but steady. "Not like this. I know who you are. I know you." For a brief moment, Amora held grip of the magic. Her eyes blinked with confusion, as though she didn't understand why she was hearing these words. For just a moment, the witch's power seemed to be down. "You remember?" Amora's voice was soft, a faint trace of the girl she had been. "You still care? After everything I've done?" Ikenna's eyes filled with tears. "You're still in there, Amora. I know it. Please, fight this." As Ikenna spoke, the earth around them shook again, this time with a deep, scary sound. The ritual that the elders had prepared for was beginning, and the land itself seemed to fight against it. Ikenna's chest tightened. He could feel the magic, the bond between Amora and the witch, pulling him toward the dark. But now, as his love and memory of their shared past reached her, the darkness in Amora's eyes began to blink again. She was struggling, her body was itching, her hands were trembling as if fighting a war within herself. But the witch's hold on her was still too strong. "Ikenna," Amora's voice was a whisper now. I can't." Suddenly, a force stronger than any physical barrier slammed into Ikenna. It was Nina's magic, the village's last hope. The elder had begun the ritual, but it required a something, Ikenna. He has to destroy the bond, not just with words, but with sacrifice, a sacrifice that would take everything from him. He took a deep breath. This was it. If he failed, everything would be lost. He had no choice now. He had to destroy the link between Amora and the witch forever. "I'm sorry, Amora," he whispered. The ritual was complete. The world around them shattered. Light and dark collided in a forceful explosion of energy that shook the very earth. Amora screamed as her form came out, her connection to the witch started to loose and dark smoke started to come out from her body. Meanwhile Ikenna, body covered with agony, was thrown back as the magic recoiled around him. When the light faded, Amora was gone. The forest was still. The land lay in derp silence. Ikenna struggled to rise, but his strength had been drained. He looked around, his heart breaking as he saw the result of the ritual. Amora's body lay before him, lifeless and broken. The witch had been defeated, but at what cost? Weeks passed, and the village began to heal. The land slowly recovered from the damage caused by Amora's magic. The crops returned, the river ran clear, and the people were no longer covered by fear. But the cost of freedom was heavy. Ikenna stood at the edge of the village, staring into the forest. He could still feel Amora's presence, lingering in the wind, in the sound of the leaves. She had been both savior and destroyer, the last witch who had ruled with fear but had also loved with purity that no one could have understood until it was too late. The land continued to heal, the village continued to rebuild, but the scars of Amora's reign would never fade. And neither would the memory of the girl who had once been his friend.